Hi friends, welcome to Two Dads, One Car, where we talk about modern fatherhood. I'm bringing on a very dear friend of mine, Bruce. We're part of this weekly mastermind. He's been part of the show since day one. And once he crossed the 1 year mark of being a dad, I knew I wanted to bring him in on the show. Bruce is a father of one. He's also a dentist as a profession, so I'll be picking his brain about cavities and all that because I think it's important. And beyond that, he is such a masterful moderator, speaker. He goes deep, and I'm so grateful to have him in my circle. So we'll be tapping into his philosophy, what he's learned in this past year. And so this is the perfect episode, especially for those who are new dads or those who want to relearn and reimagine and figure out nuggets that they can apply to their own lives. And so with that, I am picking him up very shortly. This is my first recording of 2026, and it's so great to start off with Bruce and with you all. Chat soon. Well, Bruce, welcome to Two Dads One Car. What a thrill to have you in the seat and in the podcast studio.
It's happening.
This is awesome. As you know, I usually like to start the questions with what is an unspoken truth. So we can start there, or we can start with something else. But given that we've known each other for many, many years, this is going to be a warm. I'm excited for this conversation. We chat every single week on our weekly mastermind and beyond. And you're such, I'm so blessed to have you in my life and beyond. And you've been supporting this podcast from day one. And so, to you, you are a father of one now. What is the unspoken truth?
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about this for a year, actually, because I've listened to almost every episode. So before I get there, I do want to say a few praises about my good friend Steven and this show. I think I was there from day zero because I'm just so proud of Steven because he is probably one of the most visionary and ambitious friend, incredible with incredible energy. And when he has a great idea, he makes it happen. So to see this unfold from a thought into this, I would say, a movement of Two Dad, One Car, it's incredible. Because I would say being a parent is probably one of the greatest equalizers. You don't know, right? Whether you're a billionaire or a president or a dentist like myself or a lawyer, our babies don't care, right? They're going to pee on us. They're going to crap on us, they're gonna scream at us. So I think to be here to be on this show and to be able to be alongside all these great dads and learning and sharing some of our struggles and learning from each other, it's an incredible opportunity. So I thank Steven for inviting me. I was I've been waiting patiently until this moment.
And a golden ticket.
Steven was saying, you gotta do your reps first. So I totally understand. So like Steven said, my wife and I were blessed to have a baby Kai 13 months ago. So he's 13 months now. And it's funny because maybe 10 years ago, I actually had a dream of having a boy named Kai. And Kai actually comes from one of my favorite words, Kaizen, which is a Japanese word for incremental compounding growth. And we actually found out that Kai means ocean in Hawaiian. And my wife is a swimming instructor, and Kai is like a dolphin. He could go underwater when he was 3 months, and now he loves the water, very comfortable. And thirdly, why Kai is because I always thought that my name should have been Kai, because my Chinese name is Kai Yen. And I don't know how my parents picked Bruce, but I think it was out of a hat at an English school when I was kindergarten. So that's how Kai came to be. So I think Kai has been one of the greatest teachers. But you said this unspoken truth, right? So I've been thinking a lot. Of course, there's so many unspoken truths, but I had to narrow it down to one. If I had to narrow it down to one, it would be memento mori. Memento mori, and that's life is short. It's fleeting and very finite. And there's a quote from Marcus Aurelius. He says that death is the only prophecy that never fails. Right? Death is the only prophecy that never fails. So I think I've been living with this in mind for a while, and I think now being a father, it means even more to me. And there's, I think, two parts to this because it relates to time, right? Our awareness of time and also how we invest our time. And I can, go a little bit deeper with these
Please.
two elements.
Please, let's do it.
So the first part was our awareness of time, right? I read this book. It's called 4,000 Weeks a few years ago, and that really allowed me to be even more aware of the limited amount of time we have. So when they did a study, and they actually went around and asked thousands of people, hey, how much time do you think we have, on this planet, on this paradise Earth, right? And all sorts of answers from like a million weeks or thousands of weeks to like people just didn't really know because people don't think about death, right? It's actually 4,000 weeks, so we only really have 4,000 weeks, and that's 80 years. That's the lifespan. So out of those 4,000 weeks, we've already spent half of it.
Yeah.
So if we're lucky, we only get maybe 2,000 weeks plus left, right? And who knows? This is we're talking like this is the max capacity, right? So I think having this awareness is very important because it really allows you to be aware of how you invest your time. This first part we can't control, but we must be fully aware. That's why Memento Mori is a great reminder for me every moment to know what to invest my time in. So the first part we can't control, but we must be aware. So the second part is the investment in time, right? So we all have finite time, but I would say mostly people would say that they don't have time, and to be now a father, to say that we don't have time, for our child. Now we outsource a lot of things with parenting, but I think there are things that we must invest with our child, right? Because there are things that we just can't outsource. So I think I've become even more careful with how I invest my time. And Steven is the master of time planning, and I'm learning a lot from him. But I mean, to be able to have this show going on in the new year, having a second newborn, I don't know how you're making this work, but I would say I'm still learning, but I would say the investment of time and to be able to create time the finite time that we all are limited and have is probably one of the most important things with life and being a father.
Tell me a bit more about how you invest time with Kai, given the trade-offs, right? I think a lot of listeners may be from, white-collar professions or in places that, various backgrounds, but the great thing about this show is we capture different voices from different backgrounds. So like, how do you invest your time with Kai, and what do those trade-offs look like? Because I'm sure, there's dentists who practice 6 days a week, 7 days, even more, have multiple clinics, right?
Yes.
But I think you probably got out of that rat race somehow, right? But also, take that for where you're at. I'd love to see how you do this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the investment of time is something that people write about. We're reading a book called Buy Back Your Time. People talk about lack of time. It's a big struggle. So I think time just doesn't you can't just create time out of thin air. We know there's limited time. But you have, one is first a mindset, and two is you have to really plan ahead. I am fortunate that I have to plan out my entire year ahead of time because of scheduling, and I don't want to be there when my patients are booked 6 months that I'm not there. So it has to be planned ahead. So I'm fortunate that my calendar is blocked a year in advance, and that really helps because it's like that filling the jar analogy. How do you fill this jar with rocks, with big rocks, small rocks, pebbles, sand, right? You have to put in those big rocks first, right? Those big rocks, I feel like, is the most important things that in my life. That's my family, my health, right? So once you set those blocks, then you can put in those rocks, smaller rocks, and then pebbles, and then sand, right? So with that mindset, I plan out my entire year, right? I block out time. And sometimes I don't know what I'm going to do for that month off or those 2 weeks off, right? But I just know that when I have that time, which is so valuable and so finite, that I'm going to fill it with something important.
Yeah, and I think what's also interesting is that, you know, where you can, you're able to also have that dedicated time with your spouse, right? I think it's also like having the ability, whether it's to bring in a nanny for the day, whether it's like having in-laws help out with leading on relatives and friends.
Yes.
I find that that is probably super critical, right, in terms of
Yes.
the relationship, right?
Oh yeah. Oh totally. Yeah. And we were just talking about our extended families too, right? You know, to have time to take care of ourselves, our partner. We have to have support sometimes, you know. So sometimes we have to um, get help from our grandparents, right? So we're fortunate that we have amazing grandparents that love Kai, and they're also healthy enough to be able to take Kai overnight. So that sometimes my partner and I we go travel, right? We still live life, you know, pre-child, very similar. You know, there's a kind of a triangle that I also um, live by. You know, people talk about the priorities, right? So on the base of the triangle is self-care. No, I'm going to take care of myself first because that's the foundation. And then the second layer is our spouse, right? We talk about, you know, if our partner is not happy, no matter how well our work is going, you know,
That's right.
it's not the same feeling, right, at home. So our spouse, we have to take care of, you know. So I do massages for my wife every night. That I know that's her love language.
Love it.
Yeah. So even when I'm really tired, you know, still that massage means a lot to her. Of course, words of praise. And then finally, it's people around us, right? Of course, Kai, our children, is definitely a priority. But never forget this triangle because a lot of people, it's almost they kind of they go the reverse.
Yeah.
So once they become a parent, it's like survival mode, right? It feels like survival because they haven't taken care of themselves. So this reverse triangle is like standing on its tip. You know, it's not easy to, you know, balance this triangle, right, when it's on its tip.
I think I just had this visual, and thank you for that triangle analogy. You know, let's say there's a new dad who's listening to this, right? And or those who are reliving or about to embark on this journey, right? And the reason you're brought on, it's been a year plus, right? And
Yep.
so what would you say to that new father, given that what you just shared about the triangle and the time and beyond?
Yeah, well, I do have many friends who are going to be new fathers.
Love
So
it.
I just met up with a friend this week. So I would say sometimes they have a lot of fears, you know, like, am I going to have to give up my life, you know, my hobbies, my lifestyle for this baby? And the answer is no. You know, it will become a yes if for example, this triangle is on its tip,
Yeah.
right? Survival mode. But if you plan ahead, and it goes back to the time, right? You know, if you don't have time, you're not going to be able to do much. You know, it's survival mode, right? So there are things that you like listening to this show. You hear a lot of commonalities of what all parents go through. You know, like I said, either you're an entrepreneur or a politician or a medical professional. It's all the same when you become a parent, right?
Yeah.
So the common factor also is time, right? You know, with our careers, I mean, out of those 2,000 weeks of, you know, time working, I would say a good 80% is of time and energy is dedicated to our profession.
Yes.
And for me, I feel like that's a very out of balance, and I also understand, you know, in the environment that you live in really sometimes dictates the amount of time we spend at work, unfortunately, because things are expensive. So, I mean, you have to plan ahead knowing what you can control and what you can't control. You know, if you think that, you know, buying that new house is going to take away that time, not going to buy back time, then it may not be the right decision, right? Because like I've experienced, you know, if you have
Please.
time,
Yeah.
you have to. If you need time, then you have to plan ahead, right? So I think if you plan ahead and you have the time, then you can still live out a great life with your hobbies, with your time with your partner, and still spend quality time with your child. Right?
I really like what you said there about time and also parenting being like the great equalizer, right? Because like you said in the very beginning, right? Whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, entrepreneur, a politician, like parenting humbles us. Like kids don't care. Like
No, they don't care.
they don't care how many cavities you filled that day or whatever big
No, no,
case you won or you just got reelected or you didn't get reelected. They don't care.
no,
They care about whether how you act when you walk through the door
exactly.
and the energy you provide when you hold it, right?
Yeah,
They don't care.
they don't
Right.
care. Well, I think sometimes it's the reverse. You know, the more tired you are, the more they cry. The more they cry for your attention. So it's almost they almost. I feel like babies, even because they can't talk and communicate, they sense energy really really well. So that's why I feel like they're the greatest teachers because it almost snaps you out of that zombie mode sometimes when you're tired, and you come back to the time awareness.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
I like what you said about the zombie mode. This is actually a good segue because one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, we do a weekly mastermind, and Bruce sheds really fascinating insight about what he does and the energy he brings into it, how Kai transforms when you're indoor, outdoors. Please share that insight with the audience, right?
Yeah.
Love to get, learn about your lessons and your learnings, please.
Yeah. Well, I think because I have time, so I can become aware of his behaviors, right? When I'm busy, of course, we're survival mode. We're just trying to make him stop crying. But when you have time and you have the full day with your baby, and you observe him crying, and you change up the environments, you actually realize that the reason why he's crying is because he just doesn't like the environment. Imagine putting an animal in a concrete box for the whole week, right, without seeing nature, trees, smelling the air, climate controlled rooms. We're not really designed to be in a concrete box. No matter how big our houses are, it's still a box.
Yes.
Right. So I find that the moment we take Kai outdoors, he's just in Zen mode. No toys or food or whatever can give him that same experience. So we spend a lot of times outdoors walking, and we always love doing things together if we can. So that also gets me out walking. We love nature walks. So I find if he's fussy, we take him out for a walk in nature, or we dug him in the pool, in the bathtub. Yeah, because that's water is also his happy place. And I think because he spent most of his life before birth in water, I think they are just naturally very comfortable with being in water.
That's so interesting, and I resonate with what you said. It's such a good reminder too, where we spend our lives in this this concrete box, right?
Yeah,
you could have really nice windows, or maybe not, right?
Yeah.
So if we ourselves feel that sense of, of course our kid's gonna feel that way.
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating. You saw that parallel. You're like, okay, let me just take Kai for a walk outdoors, right? Or go to the nearby Deer Lake Park, and you see that difference.
Yes.
You're like, oh, it is the environment, because there's so many similarities.
Yeah, that's true. It's there's kind of two paths. There's one that's like the hard path.
Yeah.
It's like you're swimming up current, and there's another path which is like you're just flowing down the current. I always trying to find a path where it's just flow and easy. A lot of parents they struggle. At home they can't leave the house, or they just can't physically get out of the environment. But there's always a way. So sometimes you can fight the current, or you can kind of go with the flow. And I find the more you think about the flow, the more you start to find patterns that really works for your baby, some things that they like. But that, again, takes time because it takes a lot of awareness. We know even if you had time, what sometimes I even do is like I'm on my phone, right? And one thing I notice is the moment that you pick up the phone, the baby just wants to hit it out of your hand. It's just something about this phone and technology that is just so toxic that I feel like that we don't feel, but the baby senses, so they either want to slap it out of your hand, or they want to look at the screen or press buttons, so that's also another reminder for me. You know what? Even if I have time at home, I am just present there with him, observing him, and be able to change up the scenery if he gets fussy. But most of the time, he's pretty chill.
Yeah.
He's a very, very zen baby.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate, a very happy baby as well. And I think our babies reflect us, really. They're really a mirror image of us. If we're pretty chill, pretty zen, pretty happy, smiling all the time, they're going to mirror and learn that too. So
yeah. You know what? So thank you for sharing the phone swap and the zen, because as I shared with you at the beginning before we started recording, this is actually my first recording since having two.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So all the reveal the curtain is that I pre-book a lot of my recordings.
Yeah.
And then knowing that I had a newborn, I just pre-stacked them. And so I knew the first must be like full in, just like at home. So this is the first recording. I think we're about to hit the 2-month mark, right? But you're right though, because I noticed that when I have my AirPods on and listening to an audiobook, like my daughter, second daughter was like fussing, right? She's like, I'm like, what is going on here? It's like, fine, okay, I'll turn off the audiobook, right? I'll turn off the podcast.
It's hard to fool them, right? Even if you kind of hide that AirPod, they see that, right?
And I think it's probably beyond. There's something there, right? And I was just chatting with I have a Cantonese teacher, and he's really into cats. Like he's like a future cat whisperer, right? But even with animals, they sense presence, they sense the energy, right? If you come into the room, right, from a place of frenetic, like anxiousness, right, the kids will sense it. And so I think there's so much magic in the formula, the triangle you talked about, because when we ourselves are in a good place, right, there is that flow through effect.
Yes.
But I also acknowledge though, right, the effort to go outside, right? There is that initial resistance before you get to that flow.
Yes. It's like the rocket ship analogy, right? You know, the takeoff, you know, having to dress your baby in winter, you know, when it's raining, but the initial takeoff is so hard. But once a rocket is boosted off and in space, then it's flow, right? Or you can just, you know, spend the whole journey, you know, in like suffering mode, right? Because we resist that hard takeoff, right? So that's why there's always two paths. You know, if we remember, hey, is there an easier path? You know, maybe there's an easier path. Then we start to think a bit differently.
And sometimes that easier path requires that initial launch off point, right?
Yeah.
There's so much analogy to even just life ourselves, like whether it's like difficult conversations with a coworker, with a direct report, with your spouse, right? That initial, you know, that's one hurdle, whether it's going out to the gym. I was actually just listening to an episode this morning. I shared it in our group with James Clear and Andrew Huberman. And it's talking about the when you go to the gym, the strongest weight is actually the front door. Like that is the strongest weight. It's like the front door of your house.
That's a good point.
That is actually the hardest weight. And everything else beyond that is like not. It's like it's like not going to be as hard.
That's true. That is true. That's why, you know, Stoicism, right? They preach doing the hard things, right, in the morning, right, first thing in the morning. And you know, when you do hard things, then it trains your mind to lift off. You know, it's a rocket ship lifting off, right? You know, like Steven was saying, you know, that the front door is the hardest, is the heaviest, right? You know, putting the running shoe on is the hardest, is the heaviest, right? So if you train yourself to do hard things, that's controlled. I do a cold plunge every morning. I love it. I find it's or cold shower you can do. That's what really trains the mind to overcome that rocket ship, that boost off. Because what's on the other end is just flow. You know, it's just so much easier.
I guess to do a hard pivot on topics, talking about flow, talking about professions, I can't help because you were my first guest here with a dental background. And I know you're not necessarily a pediatric dentist, but you know quite a bit about dentistry, and you have kids who are patients as well too.
Yes.
You probably see a lot of kids on the chair who probably, like my daughter, have eaten a lot of candy. I must admit, many cavities there. Bruce was a great a third party to get his advice on. But what would you say, and is something for dads to be aware of? Because a lot of these dads, we want to get involved, right?
Yeah.
We want to ensure that the health of our children is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want to be part of this conversation. So what is something that dads should know, even parents, right, when it comes to the health of the children and teeth and all that?
Yeah. No, I love to share. I'm a general dentist, so as a general dentist, we treat anyone from newborns to elderly, right? So, I'll speak from some of my humble background as a dentist, but I would say on the topic of unspoken truths, I would categorize into two main topics that people don't really know, that people constantly ask because there's consequences. One is cavities, how it's formed, everything around cavities. Two is actually breathing and sleeping, which we don't talk enough about. So I'll start with the first one, cavities. People think, okay, eating candies, not brushing, these are source of cavities. Yes, some people, they come in and they're like, oh my gosh, like how come I have like 10 cavities? Cavities don't form overnight. They even don't form over weeks. They form over months, years of repetitive sources. So what are the three sources that causes cavities, right? So a cavity essentially is a hole in the tooth, right? To simplify it, it's a hole in the tooth. So there's three things that causes cavities. One is bacteria, right? Bacteria, that's why we have to brush. But the unspoken truth is, floss, right? Most people don't floss. Why? Because it's a pain in the butt. It's hard to do. But imagine showering, but not cleaning your back, not cleaning under your armpits, right? These are hard areas that's hard to get to, but that's why most cavities, I would say 80 to 90% of cavities are not on top of the teeth or on the side of the teeth. They're in between your teeth, right? Especially for babies, for baby teeth, primary teeth, they're much thinner than adult teeth. Their enamel is actually very thin. So it doesn't take much for the hole to penetrate through that helmet and get into what I call the dentin, which is the chocolate part of the teeth. And of course, into the dentin is the nerve, right? So this small little helmet is trying to protect bacteria from penetrating through. So it doesn't have a lot of doesn't really have a lot of chance to do that. So that's why brushing, flossing especially is key to this first part. Second part, we talk about sugar. Right? A lot of people think, hey, it's just candies, right? It's not just candies. It's actually simple carbohydrates. So we're talking like rice, we're talking like white bread, we're talking like sugar, even juices. These are all sources of food for bacteria. So what happens is the bacteria will metabolize these food sources, and then it's gonna create acid, and then it's gonna create holes in your teeth. That's how it happens, right? So even if you have bacteria and you limit the amount of food source for the bacteria, then your chance of cavities will be much lower, right? And the frequency of the source is actually the most important thing, not the amount. So a lot of times we may inadvertently be feeding our babies or kids juice, right, in the sippy cups. But we don't be doing that because then you're repeatedly giving this bacteria food source to create acid, to create the attacks, right? So what you want to do is you want to limit these sugars before and after, about half an hour before and after meal times. Why? It's because during that time we have the most amount of saliva, and saliva is actually what prevents cavities. It has many benefits. One of them is fighting cavities and buffering the acid.
Oh, interesting. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So leading to that is there's this third part, which we can't control, unfortunately, which is genetics. Some people just never get cavities. Some people floss and have great diet, they get cavities. So that's why we should not forget that genetics, our DNA, plays a big factor. So what's within our control? If you have a high cavity risk, then we have to supplement that, right? And we know that, hey, we get this child is more prone to cavities, our child is more prone to cavities, then we may want to maybe up our fluoride in our toothpaste, right?
Right.
Yeah, so the amount of fluoride in the toothpaste can help because fluoride has been scientifically proven to strengthen and remineralize the lost tooth structure in our enamel, right? It has been scientifically proven, and I know some of our drinking water may not contain fluoride, as well. Depends on where you live.
Yep.
So to supplement with extra fluoridated toothpaste, which you can get over the counter oftentimes, can help, fight that genes.
That's one of the things I've adopted since talking to you about this, because you can even get like Colgate high fluoride toothpaste for your
Correct.
kids.
Yes.
And my daughter's been using it. She loves it because it tastes like strawberry. Like for her, it's like her
awesome.
favorite toothpaste.
Yes.
And yes, it's a bit more. I bought it on Amazon, right? So it's a bit more than the conventional ones. But like, the dental bill is going to be much lower. My hope is.
yeah. But you know what's funny? A lot of times people resist getting that toothpaste because they think it's like $10 more.
Yeah, it's it's 16 versus 6, right? Just to give you guys some context, right?
Exactly, yeah. But of course, you get a cavity, it's more than $10, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Let's say you're in this. You're a dad of a 1-year-old, right?
Yes.
How does one floss a 1-year-old?
Yeah, it's a struggle.
Do you distract it with Paw Patrol? Like, do you sing and dance?
Sometimes there's something called like a knee to knee, right? Of course, to be able to floss someone that's moving, it's difficult, right?
Yes.
So you almost have to almost lock them in place where it's comfortable for them.
Like jiu-jitsu style?
Kind of jiu-jitsu. Yeah, it is jiu-jitsu. So if you search up knee to knee, there's a technique, it takes 2 people to hold them so they're not moving. Right? And all you need really is, like 10 seconds, 10, 15 seconds, so you're not hurting them. I find sometimes when we use like distractions, it may not work, right?
Yeah.
Because they're really tired at the end of the day, they're fussing around, but you want to be able to hold them really, really comfortably and really firmly. And I think sometimes it takes 2, but there are techniques you can search on YouTube.
Okay.
But yes, I think the flossing sometimes is a challenge. But once the baby knows that it's brushing and flossing, they're gonna know when they have more awareness that flossing is part of the routine.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's useful to hear from your perspective, both as a dentist, but also as a father, right? So I'm gonna look up this knee-to-knee technique.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. And for those parents, that do have higher cavity as well, they can also get the high fluoride toothpaste as well.
Yeah.
And also, when you get older, of course, you start to take more medications. We're hitting our 40s, getting into our mid-age.
Yeah.
So some people take medications, and what happens with medication is actually it dries up your mouth. A lot of these medications actually decreases saliva.
Oh,
right? It decreases saliva, and remember we talked about how saliva is a buffer and fights cavities.
Yeah.
So if you have no saliva, then you're gonna get higher cavities, right? That's just the cause and effect. So in that case, then of course on top of a higher fluoride content, you want to get something that will stimulate saliva, and that's why something like a xylitol gum or xylitol lozenge that you can suck on or bite, chew on. It stimulates your salivary gland to produce saliva, because every time we chew, it produces saliva, right? Because our body's preparing the saliva for food, breaking down food. So that's something you can try.
This is fascinating. Of course, none of this is medical advice. Consult your own doctor, dentist, etc.
Yeah.
Legal disclaimer over. But still, like it's man, I need to get Colgate or someone to sponsor this podcast.
Well, I know a few. Yeah. I could hook you up.
We'll get Invisalign.
Yeah,
Not even related to this. Well, thanks for sharing that insight. I think you and I talk about this. There's a lot of unknowns, right? A lot of myths, or just people are just not aware, right? And how do we present in a way that people don't feel ashamed and feel scared, right? We want to help make that first initial door push a little lighter where we can.
Yes.
Through these kind of insights. Like I had no idea that, it's much easier to have cavities as kids because their teeth, the thickness is so thin.
Yeah.
Right? And so like, okay, well, that makes it even more important and more imperative that we help on that. But related to that, I think you're also involved with like many initiatives. One is called Future DMD. You do a lot of volunteer work in the community. And do you ever have these aspirations? Like, do you, now that you have a son of your own, is there something about like in the future you want to bring him along with you and go on these trips with you? Like, walk me through,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's my dream, right? Is to have Kai alongside me, on my dental mission trips and be there to experience, how fortunate we are to be living in first world. Because we're talking about, fluoridated toothpaste, these tools we have to fight genetics. We talk about the food, floss even, a lot of these places don't have a toothbrush, right? So, I mean, for him to be able to see how fortunate and feel how fortunate he is to be able to have all that, I think it's going to change his life. And of course, for me to be going back every year, it also is probably one of my greatest lessons for myself, reminders of how privileged and how fortunate I am.
Yeah.
I want to briefly touch
Please.
on that second unspoken truth about the breathing part, because I think it's important. So a lot of people don't know how impactful breathing is for you, right? And specifically, it's nose breathing, right? A lot of kids, they actually have allergies or they have structural barriers that prevents them from breathing through their nose. So they become chronic mouth breathers, right? So if you are a chronic mouth breather when you're a child, then you're going to develop many, many things, from behavioral issues, which we sometimes misdiagnose as ADHD, to developmental issues with your palate and teeth. There's so many negative consequences of mouth breathing, because our mouth is meant for eating, it's not meant for breathing, and our nose is meant for breathing. So if you find that your child is snoring a lot, grinding their teeth excessively, consistently, then you may want to investigate that further, because like I said, chronic mouth breathing is not a good thing, and it actually can impact you as an adult as well.
So when it means investigating, we mean like just bringing it up with their general doctor?
Correct.
Seeing like a ENT specialist?
That's correct, yeah. So either with your GP, they usually will, it's unfortunately a long wait. You can bring up to your dentist as well.
Interesting.
Not all dentists are very comfortable with assessing their airway, know about the consequences of most nose breathing, mouth breathing. But it's worth investigating, bring up to any medical professional, but keep following up, right?
So takeaway is to get it checked up, or just to bring it up.
Yeah. Observe your child when they're
Yeah.
sleeping, just for maybe half an hour when they pass out. Is their mouth open, right? Are they breathing through their nose or their mouth? Right? Occasionally, they may be breathing through their mouth because they're congested or have a cold. That's fine. But we're talking like 80-20, right? If 80% of the time they're mouth breathing, then that could be an issue, right? So if they're breathing through their nose, all good. And some signs of mouth breathing is, like I said, grinding your teeth excessively, snoring. Why they grind their teeth? Because they're stressed out. People grind their teeth because one reason is because they're stressed, right? If they're not getting good sleep and their stress is very high, the cortisol is very high, they grind their teeth. And during daytime, what happens to stressed out people? They're like agitated, right? So a lot of kids are like, like almost like ADHD like behavior. They're like throwing stuff, like throwing tantrums, like causing problems at school. It may not be ADHD. It may be because you're just tired.
Yeah. That's such an interesting parallel.
We have our part as parents to be able to do our own research and bring this up to professionals.
The insight that I'm getting from this actually is that you and I are probably aware of this, where more and more kids are being diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah.
Right. In some sense, maybe it's overdiagnosed.
Yeah.
But sometimes the root cause may be something that's actually physical, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting from this conversation, that it might just be something breathing.
Yeah.
And it could be from a younger age. Maybe they're just tired. Like when you and I are tired, of course, I'm fidgety, right? Like there's no way I could sit still if I'm exhausted and haven't slept.
Exactly.
All of us who's listening, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe it's something else, right? And so I think it's interesting to see, maybe there is something physical connected to this.
Yes. Yeah.
Love it. I love it. Well, as we round the corner here, what is something that you're excited about in this next chapter? I guess this year two of fatherhood for you and beyond.
Yeah, well, so many things. Like you said, um, I look forward to one day taking him on these experiences where he gets to see the world and expand his perspective. But now, we just came back from Taiwan. For 5 weeks, we went to Taiwan. We
That's
went
right.
to Vietnam. So I think just being with him every step along the way as much as possible to experience life, to learn with him, to learn from him together as a family. I think having Kai in my life really accelerates my own growth, my relationship with my family, my relationship with my friend, because I have a child, I get to be on your podcast, this amazing podcast, be alongside these great dads, right? So I think, a child could greatly enhance your life, but it could also greatly become a great detriment to your life too. We all know the amount of time and energy we need, right? So I think the first thing we must do is we must go back to our schedule and try to find time, because how we invest our time will determine our life, especially as a father, right? So I'm fortunate that I've designed my life in a way where I do have time to invest in things that I feel like is most important.
I love it. There's so much that I'm gleaming from this. I can't wait to re-listen to it. I can't wait to go through our discussions together, dive deep here, go quantum as we like to talk about on our.
Was that quantum enough for you?
It's all quantum here
It's
on
all
the
quantum. I
Mastermind.
love it,
It's
I love
just
it.
being able to flow with you and.
Yeah, that's the only way.
I love it. It's the only way. Well, Bruce, I appreciate you. Thank you for being on Two Dads, One Car. What a joy to have you on. And thanks for taking the time in this morning on your Friday to be in the car and to chat with us today.
No, I feel very honored, and I feel like this is a dream come true for me. It might be the reason why I have had a kid. To be on this podcast to share this space with you.
Thank you so much. Well, once it's up, share it out. For those who are listening, thank you so much for listening. We'll do a debrief right after this. But Bruce, take care. All right, that's a wrap. Bruce, thank you so much for being on 2001 Car. It was such a joy to have you on. I loved our conversation. I think my biggest takeaway is really in the beginning, how parenting is really the equalizer. Our kids don't care whether we are an entrepreneur, a politician, successful, whatever, right? It is the greatest equalizer. And it's also the most humbling equalizer. And I liked how Bruce shared about how your children are a mirror of who you are. And so it's been such a great way to start off the year 2026 with this recording with Bruce. And thank you all for being and listening to the show. If you liked it, if you have some insights, share the episode out on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on YouTube. This is how we grow. And I'm thankful for each and every single one of you. All right, let's go.